All right, traders, welcome to today's recap. Sorry about that for the delay. This is Christian from Tribeca Trade Group, and today is Tuesday, September 25th, the day before my mom's birthday. Just so I don't remember. Just kidding. A pretty nice day for the market. I like these days where we're basically, the overall market is flat, but it remains a stock picker's market, and if you have the right names on it, if you're rotating into the right names, then you're playing this game correctly. So S&P was basically flat for the day. It's really not much to overanalyze here. Just like I said yesterday, it's still inside this big day that we had on Thursday. So I'll leave it there. There's no sell signal. There's no we're not extended, so I think you kind of just stay with the course. And I'll talk about trade management in a second. Again, difference between option trading and again, trading and investing. With cash, right, with stock positions, much different way to position yourselves in those two different things, right? So I'm going to get into that. Let me just finish the indices and we'll talk about today's big moves. But a little bit of outperformance in the NASDAQ. And again, what I like about this too is, we go a little bit lower and we're finishing on the high of the day, which is great. And I think there were some really big moves going on within that, and I'm going to get into where there was some really nice performance. But just up a little bit today. And small caps, if we bring up the small caps, they were also just up 15 basis points. So again, really not a big move in the major indices. If you look at emerging markets, they were up today. Gold was up just a touch. The transports were down today. Bonds were down just a little bit today. So overall, there's not a lot of big movements. But just as I've been really advocating, is that there's some major moves within the indices. So again, just looking at the S&P and saying, oh, down 10 basis points, it must have been a slow day. Contrary to that, there were some really big moves in sectors. So let's start to kind of talk about those. And I'll start with one of the top performers on the day, which was metals and mining. Actually saw a pretty good order in the metals and mining ETF. So that was again, that's XME. And if I bring this up in the option act system, you could see, so you can query for any of this, any activity, but you can see that there was a nice block of 5,000 calls that went up in XME. That pretty sure that was bought in a nice size transaction. So you could think about that. It's a little bit different. It does have to have some. It does have to get through overhead resistance. I did not play this one. As all these trades that hit the tape, I filter them through my own system and see if they make sense for me to go ahead and basically they really have to make sense for me in terms of what I'm looking to do for the day, and as well as the technicals. So I think this one is interesting. I was close to taking this trade, but I decided not to, but still finished amongst the top performers. Keep in mind, tomorrow is FOMC, Fed decision. Half of this ETF is steel names. The other half is miners, a lot of gold miners. Gold tends to move a bit based on what the Fed says for that meeting tomorrow at 2:00 p.m. Eastern. Another group that was so going back to speaking of the steel names, there is a steel ETF which was actually performed better than XME. And that's also getting to the 200-day moving average. Look at the performance, by the way, since this hit a low hammer bar from 42 bucks to 46. A lot of these names have been pretty strong, right? We've talked about Cliffs Resources. I'm not in this one anymore. I got out right where I thought was the right place to do it, right in here, and unfortunately, it's continued on me. So that's fine. Another name that we've been seeing some call activity is MT. We actually saw a little bit of calls today in U.S. Steel today, so there was some activity throughout that space. And I think the ETF might not be a bad way to play it too. SLX is getting close to that 200-day moving average, just as XME. Really, where I thought that there was good performance today was in the software group. So IGV, if you notice, this group is maintained. So I want to talk a little bit about this. I want to talk a little bit about what we saw, because I really spent a lot of time on this in the Tribeca Trade Group newsletter that goes out on the weekend. And I spent a lot of time discussing this in the trading room as well. What we saw last week, a lot of those names like industrials, financials, some of the materials names, they bounced last week, but they were good for like a 2 to 3 day trade, right? I don't know if that trend is going to continue. Look at XLI continue to move down here, and as I mentioned in yesterday's video, there was quite a bit of put buying in the industrials yesterday in the individual names. Not huge size transactions, but there was about 4 or 5 different names that saw some put buying yesterday. So that was a good signal. Just to kind of to let you know what was going on with the group. I mentioned that there was some call selling yesterday in Boeing. So this is kind of like I think more of what's the right you're kind of a visitor. That's not the right phrase that I'm looking for. But some of these trades, where we see the call buying for a couple days. Or 1 or 2 days or nice move, you want to capture that move, but then you want to take your profits and then move on. Versus I think IGV is one of those groups that methodically just chugs higher, right? And that's been one of the stories this year is the enterprise application and infrastructure plays. They continue to come back. And notice that we didn't even get that much of a dip, and that looks like it's on. And if you go through one by one, a lot of names just went nuts in this group today. Zendesk had a real nice move, up 4% today. I'm drawing a blank. I'm in Autodesk in terms of the names that moved up today, but Autodesk was another one, up 1.7% today. So there was a group of these, and I think if I bring up the ETF, it will probably help me out a little bit. QLYS is another name in this space. Let me just bring up IGV. And the movers for the day, but this is what I'm in, and this is what I tend to position and really tend to kind of go after when what we experienced last week. And if you watched a couple of my videos, again, I'm referencing some of my previous work here, but yeah, FireEye, which I'm also long. VMware had a nice move. I'm looking over here in the performance. And I like a couple of these groups, which I'm debating whether or not I entered into one of these trades today. So maybe I'll share one of which with you. But it's pretty much what I had talked about last week. If you saw my weekend video on index rebalancing, I was talking about how all the winners were being sold and the losers were being bought. Well, that really worked out. If you look at in terms of what I thought was going to happen this week, look at the IBD 50, which is a lot of growth names, had a huge day today. So when the market the S&P was down today, and the IBD 50 list was up 1.5%, that's really good outperformance. And if we bring this up here, FFTY, let's see if Bloomberg will do this for me quickly. Nope, it won't. FFTY and then 8. And you could see some of the performers in this. So really, growth names came back huge. Look at Planet Fit. So I'm going to go through a couple of these names. I talked about ABMD, how we were able to catch that yesterday. Huge 2-day move for ABMD. But if you go through some of these names, so the technique here is you just kind of have to sit and be patient, because the one day, Trade Desk was up 11% today. Look at Planet Fitness. It's up 7% today. So this was, this was my own fault because I did not put this trade on. I thought it, was really coiling here. I had this in not last week's newsletter, but the weekend before as one of my favorite trades. I just didn't get a chance. I didn't put it on. I was looking for this name to kind of get out of range, and it just didn't do it. Another name that was up huge today, this at one point was up 20% today. This was another one where OptionX caught the call activity yesterday, and so pretty impressive. Square, I think, was the trade of the day in terms of catching the option activity. That was something, if you look on my Twitter page today, I mentioned that there was some pretty good call buying right around the open in this, and this finished very close to the high of the day. So another name up 10% in growth. So again, going back to what I've been talking about, last week, from really a systematic index rebalance. All of the S&P, NASDAQ rebalanced last week, and again, what they have to do is they sell the winners and they buy the losers to make the indexes back, putting them back to their benchmark weights. Getting, toning down those winners in the indices and bringing up the losers in each index. That's a very mechanical system. So, that's how I position at the end of the week. And I talked about that specifically in Amazon, and how I thought Amazon was a opportunity on Friday to get long. And you even had a better opportunity on Monday, which is what I did. I added to my position yesterday. So really, really nice. By the way, does anybody, we talked about this in the trading room today. This was brought out by a member in the room today. The performance of Amazon on Tuesdays is pretty interesting. When you get a chance, take a look at that. I'm not going to go through that on Bloomberg, which I can point that out for you, but these are the things that we go through in the trading room. Keep in mind Tuesdays in Amazon. They've been very, very strong. I don't think there's been a red day on Tuesday in Amazon in a while. But again, so this is where, always for me, Amazon is a name that I want to buy on a dip. So really nice. I had a short put spread on, so I was collecting premium, and then I had a long call spread on. Again, these are trades that we design using options for very high price stocks, where I think it's a lot easier to trade options if you do it correctly versus the stock itself, considering we're dealing with a $2,000 stock at this point. So a lot of moves like that. So I'm really pleased. Capturing some of those moves last week, like in the banks and in the industrial names that we did in the trading room, and then taking those trades off and then going into some more growth specific names, because I had a pretty strong feeling using my previous experience as a Delta One trader and an ETF trader that some of these names were going to revert back, these growth names, once the index rebalances were complete as of last week. So they did just that. All right, so just a few other names in option activity that I thought were interesting. I thought, and we have been seeing a little bit of buying. There was an order in Amazon today. Still some energy buying going on. Both APA and APC saw some calls. Besides FOMC tomorrow, the energy numbers, the weekly energy numbers come out. This is an interesting name, Cake. Now, the chart doesn't look great, I don't think. There was the announcement by Sonic today, but it's got to get over the 50-day moving average. So as I mentioned earlier in the video, that I put all the option trades kind of through my own system and through my own filter. This is close. I think Cake is close. I think if it gets above the 50-day moving average, of course you could use the 200-day moving average as well. Shack was also an interesting one today. This got going out of consolidation too, right? A little bit of coiling with these two moving averages and now moving up. I would watch the 65 VPOC. By the way, I also mentioned this earlier on Twitter today too. Sorry, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but just a lot of things that I've been talking about, and you can go through my Twitter. But I mentioned that if we can get above here, which we kind of hesitated on the top of value, but 1980, that was my target for Amazon. So I'm still long. I took some targets today, but ultimately I'll probably look to take off some more risk here at this 1980 level. And again, I talked about that on Twitter right when it was at the 1946 level there in Amazon. Just a few other trades. My video now is 13 minutes, so I like to cut these before 15. There was some I activity, just as there was yesterday. A little bit of Caterpillar buying right around the close today. Some EW had a nice reversal, sticking with this space. HOLX, that's the second day in a row. We've seen some December call buying in that one. I mentioned the Square activity right in the beginning of the day. SAP, take a look at this one. Now, this is tough because they bought the calls basically at the high of the day. But if you go to the 1 hour bar in SAP, look at the breakout and gap up in SAP. Really nice. It's one of the software names I think that gets overlooked a bit. But look at this, out of this piece, and again, that's what option activity really helps me do, is just kind of find trades that aren't on my radar, and then I can kind of take a look at them from there. Small Twitter calls. VMware saw some calls today. Again, a lot of these are small trades, but they kind of caught my attention, like the Shack. Shack actually saw some puts once the move took place. I think I mentioned Zen already. That saw a little bit of calls as well. Gave us a heads up in that one. Win. They do this, it seems like, just about every month. They go ahead and they buy calls that are going to mature right after the Macau numbers that are released on the first of the month. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I don't know if they're hedging some of their, could be that they're hedging some of their short exposure, because again, it's kind of an event. Also, the Vegas numbers, I think, get released at the end of the month, and then the Macau numbers get released on the first of the month. So there as well. TDD, I mentioned this one already. Huge move in that one. All right, so that's it. I mentioned I'll talk a little bit about strategy. So tomorrow we have an FOMC meeting. You know, it's already priced in that they're raising interest rates tomorrow, 1/4 percentage point. But really, it's going to be, you know, the path of rate increases after this meeting. You know, how many more are they going to do? What are they going to do in 2019? So really, that will come into question. What you're going to hear is the usual stuff. They're going to talk about employment. They're going to talk about growth. They're going to talk about inflation. They're going to talk about the shape of the yield curve, right? So those are all things that you could expect. But you know, so what do I do on Fed days? I take off some risk. You know, I've talked about what I did last week and what I've done in the beginning of this week. I've had a pretty good week. So, you know, the main thing to remember, or one of the things to remember, and by the way, this video is for information purposes only. I always need to say that every video. But you know, with option trading, you don't want to be super greedy, right? In your investing, you can continue to stick with the trend, stay with the trend. You know, and maybe take some targets off as you go along. But for option trading, you know, you've got to make some decisions. And if you have some really nice gains that come, you know, in a day or in 2 days, 3 days, if you're doing some swing trading, you get a 50% gainer or even a double or even more than that. Don't be super greedy, especially when you know that the markets are going to swing around a little bit. You know that they're going to whipsaw around after the decision and the language that they present. So just keep that in mind. I talked, the last group I wanted to talk about was just healthcare equipment names. You know, that's been another group that's been strong. That's XHE. That's been strong, you know, for the most part of this year. It dipped a little bit as well when we had a little bit of the growth sell-off. They're all coming back pretty nicely as well. So, you know, that's another group to keep your eye on, as well as that IGV. Those are two areas that I like to keep coming back to, you know, on dips, rather than, you know, just take off a bounce. All right, guys, thanks for watching the video. Have a great night. See you tomorrow.